assessment, formative, and 40% from summative. Our national assessment falls in line with that same pattern. Okay, so we are introducing a new assessment in. We have since 2020, then Minister of Education had indicated that we were going to discontinue the test of standards. The test of standards had lost the significance of what it was intended to do and had come to be known for basically placing students in high school, finding out who was placed first, second, and third, and so on. At this point in time, we would like to focus on learning outcomes. We would like to focus on, so the purpose of the assessment is to find out if the curriculum is working, where the gaps are, to inform policy decisions, to inform our decisions going forward regarding school needs, teacher needs, student needs. Where do we need to place our resources? What kind of professional development do we need to engage in? Okay, and to identify needs of students. So that is the purpose of the national assessment that we are engaging in. As you are aware, we have not had a national assessment for the last 2 years. So we really need to, at this point in time, you mentioned earlier that COVID, we've had a lot of talk about learning loss and gaps in learning. The only way we can find that out is by doing a national assessment.
Right.
Okay?
Now you mentioned that the test of standards, as we know it, has been done away with. Now, what informed that decision to do away with it? And of course, what sort of a consultation process you had to do away with it? And who were involved, apart from the officials of the Ministry of Education, in coming to that conclusion that it no longer served its purpose and that you needed something fresh and something new going forward?
It really was more of the historical data that we have had. For the few years, the years gone by, the sharing of information regarding test of standards had really been confined to the Ministry of Education. We had seen the anxiety that students face. At primary level, we have students going to extra classes from even grade 3. A lot of stress regarding doing national assessments. Those were things that were very concerning to us. So we had discussions mostly at the education level, but in the consultations that we had consultations with the general public. So we had with the teachers union, we had with the chamber, the business community, as to what it is they really wanted to see. And all of those consultations were done in 2019.
Right, so all of that was done ahead of to inform the curriculum development.
To inform our curriculum development and our new assessment approach.
Right, now what are some of the areas in the curriculum in the curriculum that you want to see developed or developed further or to be improved? Because in looking at these consultations that you had and to do with the test of standards and to come up with the CAL, there are particular areas that you want assessed, right, in terms of the assessment, to be able to determine the learning outcomes of our children. So what are some of those areas that you have developed for assessment?
So we want to see our students develop critical thinking skills. So in our framework, because we have a curriculum and assessment framework, which speaks to what we want to see as an educated person of St. Kitts and Nevis. One of that we look at, they must be engaging, they must be creative, they must be critical thinkers, they must be able to use literacy and numeracy in their functioning, and so on. So we also want them to be global citizens as well. So in this particular assessment, we really want not just to know, to be able to find out what students know in terms of a written test, but we want to be able to determine what it is they're able to do. So the skills and the attitudes are very, very important. And as we continue in the discussion, you'll realize that the assessment is designed to determine not just what they know, because we know students normally we engage in a lot of cramming and so on, but what are they able to do?
You mentioned something, Mrs. Edme, that I think is extremely important, and it is not just what you know. It is not just knowledge, but it has to do with what you said, the attitudes and the skills, and sometimes you see it in the workplace. You have people that come to work and they have a lot of subjects, and you would from that, you will deduce that they have certain knowledge or that they may have certain skills. But at the very same time, they do not have the right attitude to work. They do not have the right attitude to people in authority. Their communication skills are very, very poor in terms of speaking and writing. And these are some of the things that employers are looking for. People who are able to communicate well, people who are disciplined, and sometimes even though you have the subjects, those things are not there.
So,
the soft skills and so on.
So that is one of the things that is heavily weighted in our curriculum. And I have to add at this point in time, in the past, we had 4 core subject areas: mathematics, language arts, social studies, and science. We now have 5 core subject areas. We have added health and wellness as a subject area because that is very important. You hear all about NCDs and so on. So health and wellness is particularly focused on life skills, but life skills and soft skills are weaved into all of the different curricula because the attitude, because when we did the consultation was done in 2019, that same point that you made was what the employers said as well. They want employees who can take initiative, who can think critically, who can be given tasks and, you know, be able to do their own research, not somebody who you have to tell to do everything. That came out very clearly in the consultations, and as such, the curriculum was designed to address those concerns. Students were also involved in those consultations, and they were saying they wanted to see more creative choices in the curriculum, too much academics. They wanted to be able to do theater and dance and all of those things there. And so all of those things went into the consideration of the development of the curriculum.
Now, Mrs. Bacchus, one of the things about the CAL is that it promises to de-stream students and to deliver greater fairness and equity for students. Of course, you know, when I went to high school from the Molyneux Primary School, that is what it was called, now the Joshua Obadiah Williams Primary School, and so sad, it really pained my heart when I looked at this school going up in flames, because that is my alma mater and holds a special place really in my heart. And we did an exam. It was called, it was in grade 6, and that exam was basically for moving on to the Keon High School, which I attended. And I used to do very well in primary school, and everybody expected me to go to 1A1, right? Because, I mean, I was at top of the class, first and second, all throughout the primary school, and I went to 1A2. And people did not expect that, you know. And at that time you had the streaming, of course. People were placed in 1A1, 1A2, 1A3, 1A4, 1A5, simply based on how they performed on this, what do you call it, a promotional exam. Sometimes you could have come and you know, you didn't do your best on that exam, but that was not really an indication of your total ability and capacity. And sometimes that is some of the problems with exams. But I mean, that is the system that we have. So in terms of the streaming and the equity and the fairness that CAL promises to deliver, what can you say about that?
So Williams, as you're speaking, you're bringing back memories even for me when I was doing just a standard in grade 6, because I had a similar experience, but I think my situation was worse because I went to 1G4 at Bastia High School and I could recall my mom on graduation night when they gave out the letters to say we were being placed. She did not have any smile in any of my photos, and I still have photos there to remind me of that. And I too was a top performer at this school, and it's because of reasons like those why we are trying to deviate from the norm and try to do something different. CAL promises to be an assessment that should not provide the students with that much anxiety. We are hoping that the students could come to school and their teacher would just tell them, you know, to have a seat, we are going to be doing something today. It's an assessment. We are not expecting them to study or to prepare or invest heavily into the preparation of CAL. In terms of the streaming process, I think most of us know that we have stopped the streaming of students, and so the results from CAL would not be used to place the students. So I think that in and of itself would present some sort of relaxation for parents as to how they should go about tackling the CAL. The results from the CAL is going to be used, as Mrs. Edmead said earlier, to test the curriculum, to let us know if this new curriculum is working. So students are not going to be placed based on how they perform. We are not even giving results in the forms of grades. In previous years, to test of standards, you waited until you hear mathematics 69%, language arts 73%, social studies, whatever the case is, and then you're trying to figure out which class your child is going to land in. The results this time would be different in the sense that we are going to be generating reports for the students, for the teachers, and also for the curriculum officers, the administrators, the ministry. So gone are the days when you get a report saying that your children got a percentage, but instead we would be able to explain to the parents and the teachers how these students would have performed according to the different outcomes, learning outcomes that we have for them. So we could tell parents whether or not your child need extra help in analyzing information, whether it is in computation, whatever the strands are, they would get a detailed report. So you don't have to try to figure out what that 70% means in terms of your child's performance. So that in and of itself is another difference that we are hoping to push with this national assessment.
Okay, so this CAL, there still will be some sort of a placement, because you have to place students in certain streams, and so okay, so there's no stream. You have to place students in certain classes, isn't that so? I'm trying to.
It is separate from the streaming process. So
it is separate from the streaming process.
The streaming is being led by the Department of Education, the Chief Education Officer. CAL is a national assessment, so it has nothing to do with placing students in class. It's about finding out where they are in terms of the learning outcomes and addressing the needs that they would have. So it's two
addressing the gaps.
The gaps, yes. It's two separate things.
Right.
So in the past,
so CAL is not about streaming.
No.
But there still will be some streaming done by the Ministry of Education.
That is for the Ministry of Education.
That's for the Ministry of Education,
yes.
And this CAL is basically for
yes,
the curriculum
for the
development
curriculum
unit.
development unit. And yes, it will inform teaching and learning in the schools, because whatever results come from for the students in CAL, if you find out, well, this student has some challenges in terms of the analyzing information, then the teacher in the next grade can learn and address that, but it's not meant for any streaming or anything like that.
Right. Okay. In terms of the curriculum, the curriculum, could you tell me a little bit in terms of what the curriculum covers? And I know you have the language arts and you have mathematics. You know, what does the curriculum cover for those two areas?
Okay, so for this year, just let me back up a bit. This year we are only assessing language arts and mathematics. So we are implementing national assessment in stages. So this year we are just using language arts and mathematics and only components of it. And then next year we will roll out more of the assessment in other subject areas. The curriculum for language arts has 3 strands. It has deviated from where it was before. We have reading and writing, viewing and representing, and listening and speaking. So those are the 3 domains, what we call strands in language arts. So in terms of the language arts, you're looking at, for example, can a student in viewing and representing, a student can look at an image and infer information from that image. Okay? In writing, can they use the writing process to develop a piece of work? So you're looking at the writing process from brainstorming all the way to the final piece. So those are some of the things that are entailed in the language arts. Can they read a passage and gather information, answer questions, infer from there? Those are some of the things. For mathematics, you have more or less the similar strands from before, where you have the geometry, you have the measurements, you have the algebra, and so on. So the curriculum is designed to assess those aspects of the curriculum based on the different strands and what we have as our essential learning outcomes and our specific curriculum outcomes. So it's designed to assess those components. Those
right,
outcomes.
because oftentimes we may probably look at reading, writing, listening, but at the very same time, what you want to assess is a person's reading skills, including comprehension skills. Listening, yes, sometimes you say that we listen, but listening comprehension. You know, you may be listening, but how much are you comprehending? And also writing, you know, to write, but writing is a skill, you know, and do you read critically? Do you listen critically? Do you write critically? And these are some of the important things. I was always told that, you know, you have a lot of people that can read, but fewer people who understand and comprehend what they read. Would you agree with that, Ornella? And not just comprehend, but to be able to look at a piece of writing, what you read from different angles, to rip it apart, to look at the writer's purpose, to look at the main idea that they're trying to communicate, to look at the way that they organize their piece of writing and all of that. Those things are very, very, very important. It's not everything that you read is true, to determine what is fact from what is opinion and all of that.
And that's a good point, Mr. Williams, because, and this is something that we are trying to do with this student. We are trying to give them certain life skills that would be necessary. So the structure of the language arts, since we're on that topic, the structure of the language arts, it's not going to only be testing the students' abilities to read and write, but there's also a performance task that is associated with the language arts as well. And you are right, sometimes children start and they do something and they may not get it correct on the first try. And I won't go into too much details because I'm certain in a subsequent program, the language arts coordinator would speak more towards this. But students would be given a performance task where they would be given chances to master whatever task it is they are going to be given. And we feel like that is very important, especially when it comes to fairness and validity. We are saying we want everybody to get a chance to be able to show us what they can do. A fair chance, that is. Yeah.
Okay, why are language arts and mathematics assessments weighed differently?
For the language arts, it is weighted at 50. Okay? If I remember correctly. But the language arts and the mathematics, because of the structure of the curriculum, what you have is that you are weighing it based on the emphasis that is placed in the curriculum. So for example, for mathematics, you have a lot of emphasis being placed on the number strand. And so because of that, you find that you have the written component of the mathematics assessment being weighted at 70%, while the performance task is being weighted at 30% because the other strands make up the performance task. So that brings me to the point where we also have a performance task for math. So in May, students will be engaged in actually doing things to show their understanding of geometric shapes, angles, and so on. Not just on a paper, but they actually have to do a task relating to that. Now, for the language arts, on the other hand, the portfolio seeks to assess writing, and that includes the organization of thoughts, expressions, and so on. And we felt that the different, because of that, you would have a 50% weighting for each component, both the written component and the portfolio component. Okay, so it's based on the emphasis that is being placed. If you are spending a lot more time on a particular strand teaching throughout the year, then it's only fair that when you do the assessment, that strand would have a higher weighting. Okay.
Right. So this assessment is going to inform or to guide instruction. So it basically means then that you have to work along with the Ministry of Education in terms of, because teachers are the ones that give instruction. And so therefore, whatever the results are from this assessment would be delivered to the Ministry of Education to be implemented by teachers in the classroom, so that teaching and learning can take place and be more effective, filling in the gaps that are basically there. Now, when do you intend to deliver this national assessment?
So the dates for national assessment, it will be done in June. I don't have the date specifically, but I'll get it to you before the end of the program. But I want to say before that, though, that we have started paving the way for the national assessment. And you mentioned here that the teachers are the ones in the classroom who would be with the students and who would be given the instructions. And we know that this whole process is something new and something different for the teachers. So in this moment, I just want to plug in that on our end, we have started some professional development sessions with the teachers to try to make this process as smooth as possible for them. we are cognizant of the fact that the implementation of this cannot happen without the classroom teachers. They are the ones in the classroom. Another difference between CAL and the test of standard is that we do not intend to bring in any external assessors into the classroom with the students to monitor or administer the exam. So we are depending heavily on the teachers to make sure that an environment in the classroom is created for the students that is one that is free of anxiety, and one that is comfortable for them. So with these professional development sessions, we have sessions like how to score the performance tasks. We have sessions on understanding what this new national assessment is about. The sessions are ongoing. As a matter of fact, just this morning we had a PD that was talking about scoring the language arts performance tasks, and we have more PDs to come. The teachers, for the most part, we have been getting some sort of, they are anxious to a certain extent, and that is normal because it is different, and some persons, we kind of scared of change because we don't really know what to expect. And so that is why we are having these PDs to assist the teachers as they go down this route.
Right. Mrs. Backus, could you tell me a little bit more in terms of what the professional development consists of, the various areas of focus in the professional development?
Okay, so firstly, the professional development session started they started last year. They had consultation, but the meat of the matter started in January with an introduction to the national assessment. So in those sessions, the teachers would have gotten a synopsis of the outcomes and the purpose of the national assessment. We also had sessions on developing fear assessments. We had sessions on trying to ensure teachers that the assessments are going to be reliable, they're going to be valid, they're going to be fair. I know sometimes in the past, some teachers would have felt as if the assessments, the test of standards, they were not very, they might have been a bit biased and a bit skewed, and so throughout the process we had these sessions to show them how exactly we would have gone about developing the test of standard. The performance tasks, that is something different for teachers as well, so we would have had sessions to expose them to that for mathematics and also for the portfolio for the language arts. We would have also have sessions with the teachers that would have focused on how they go about using the scoring rubrics. I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, but the teachers are going to be involved in the scoring of some parts of the national assessment. And so we felt it possible and needed to engage the teachers so that they could become familiar with these different types of documents as they are. We also had sessions with them to talk about how to go about doing item writings, not only for national assessment but also for their own personal development in the classroom, so that they could look at what we are sharing with them, and then they would in turn use these practices in the classroom, so that when the students come into the room for the assessment, everything would not be brand new for them. And we had professional development sessions as well that focused on how to create performance tasks. A lot of times in the classroom, teachers, we only do formative and summative assessments because it is easier for us to recycle some multiple choice questions or to recycle some structured questions. So we wanted to assist them in developing their own performance tasks that can be used in the classroom and not just only when we have national assessment. So those are some of the PDs that we would have had already with the teachers, and as it gets closer to the national assessment, we would be having more PDs that would focus on talking about the administration guide, what we expect of them or what we are depending on them to do in the classroom as the assessment is being administered, and also to tell them about how we would go about using the results as well.
Right. Now, some teachers, of course, as you mentioned, change is not something that people embrace readily. And so it means then that you have classroom culture, and classroom culture, you have school culture. And culture is not something that is easily changed. Culture is something that you have developed over time, and then, you are coming now with this CAL, which is National Assessment, which will inform how a teacher goes about doing his or her business in the classroom. It means then that you're asking for looking at the gaps, the weaknesses. You may look at the strengths as well. But what you're essentially asking for is that you're asking for change. You're asking for change in classroom management, of course, and you're asking for change in how, teachers may deliver their instruction and so on. And, not everybody may readily embrace such change. Some teachers may see it as an assessment of their performance. Some teachers may see it as, he's trying to reveal certain weaknesses in the way that I deliver my instruction, and so therefore there may be some sort of or some may just see it as, look, you're trying to evaluate me to see if I'm worth my salt, or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, it must be seen as a win-win situation, a win for the teacher and a win for the student.
Already, Mr. Williams, we are getting those comments already from the teachers. I mean, my mind is going back to a PD we had the other day, and the teacher was there saying, well, if we're not getting any points, if we can't see if my student is top in the island or whatever, what is the purpose of this assessment if it's not to provide us with grades? I mean, schools have bragging rights. It feels good when a teacher could say, my student brought back the top results. But we're trying to look past that, and that is what we're encouraging teachers to do. We're trying to change that mindset. We are looking at learning outcomes, we are looking at goals. And the smallest a goal, even if it is the child could just jump over one bar, we will celebrate it. Gone are the days when students would feel ridiculed because they did not do what, everybody was expecting them to do.
I like it, and I like the whole comprehensive approach to this national assessment. For example, earlier, Mrs. Edmead mentioned that it's not just about knowledge, but it's about skills, it's about attitudes, it's about values and virtues and all of those things that are so important in a holistic education. And, some teachers do not see it as their responsibility, basically, to be teaching a holistic education. They feel that they are just there to impart knowledge. Okay, and so therefore the attitudes and all of that sort of a thing, they may think, well, look, that is for the mother and the father in the home, and that is not for me in the classroom. That might be an additional burden for me to have to deal with in the classroom.
Actually, so the curriculum, how it is designed, it actually brings out and integrates all of these values within so the curriculum has its outcomes, it has its inclusive assessment strategies and inclusive learning strategies, everything, and it is very technologically oriented, because that is one of the things that we want for a vision of an educated person of St. Kitts and Nevis. So it is riddled with links and resources that the teachers can access. But interestingly enough, I remember last year, although we've had our challenges, at one of our review meetings, one of the principals mentioned, she said, we are only on grade 4 and 6, and I am actually seeing changes in the students, and I'm wondering what it is going to be like when we roll out the curriculum in full, because she said she was actually seeing some differences, and a lot of that, the introduction of health and wellness has really helped with that as well. So it is making an impact. Obviously, change is a process. It does not come easily, and it takes time. So the hope is that as we go through the process, and we use the results of the assessment for what it is we are saying we want to use it for, that persons will get much more comfortable. We do not want it to be a stressful process for students, nor do we want it to be a stressful process for teachers. So, but it will take some time for them to become acclimated to the process. And I want to go back to something that you said before. You referred to the Ministry of Education. Just remember, we are all Ministry of Education.
Yes,
Ministry of Education is made up of several departments and units. And the curriculum is being led by a curriculum steering committee that is made up of the Chief Education Officer, the Deputy Chief Education Officer, myself as Director of CDU, as well as the Principal Education Officer in Nevis and the Deputy. So it is a federal endeavor. So all of us, we are doing the same thing. Yes.
What type of engagement have you had with the parents?
Well, that is the one that is coming. So we had a little bit of a stall, but our next phase is to have like a virtual session with the parents, so that we can engage them in what it is to be expected. We did do, not on national assessment, but last year we had engagements with parents regarding the curriculum itself. Some schools did not get to do it because of the lockdown, but we did go around to various schools in different zones speaking to the national curriculum. So the next thing will be to engage the parents on this.
Okay, so go ahead, Mrs. Backus.
I just want to mention that Monday of this week we would have started distributing assessment sheets to the schools, and we know that some parents, it would have been communicated with the principals, and I don't think that some of the parents got the information, and so some parents are a bit in a frenzy right now, because word on the street is that the ministry has been giving the students mock exam for national assessment, and I just want to clear the air on that. The practice test was sent out on Monday of this week, and throughout the schools in St. Kitts and Nevis for this week, the grade 4 and the grade 6 students are going to be doing a practice assessment. It is not a mock exam, and it is nothing to terrify the students. The purpose of this practice assessment is to familiarize the students with the answer sheets that they would be using for the national assessment. So the questions on this practice assessment would have been just general common knowledge questions and the lower grades. They had nothing to do with the math and the language arts aspect. And as I said, it was just to familiarize the students with the answer sheets, because previously for tested standards, and I'm certain in their own classrooms, they would get a multiple choice test and they would be asked to circle the correct response. But this time around, we are giving them an answer sheet with bubble options where they would be shading in the correct response on the sheet. So that was the whole purpose of the practice assessment this week. So I hope parents could be comforted and rest assured that we were not trying to give them any mock exam, and it had nothing to do with the subjects that we are doing this year for national assessment.
Scranton.
The test, it will not be scored, it will not be part of their grades or anything like that. It is to inform us as to how comfortable they will be using the bubble sheets. What are some of the challenges that they will be experiencing, so that we know can address it. So it's to just to get information. These teachers also have a survey form, so they can note some of the information that we need, but it is not meant to go on their report card or anything like that. General questions like who is the Prime Minister of St. Kitts, simple things, but it's not meant for any grading, just to inform us, so that when it is time for them to do the national assessment, they are already familiar with the use of the bubble sheets. Yes, because to make the process easier, we will be using the Scantron machine that will be analyzing the information.
The Scantron
to get information from the answer sheets that the students would have shaded in. So we are not marking the multiple choice scripts manually. We are using a machine, and that tool would ensure that the results are fair and there would be no bias. So once these sheets are returned by next week, Monday, from the schools, we could see, and as Mrs. Edmund said with the survey form, we could see if there are any changes that we would need to make to the sheets to ensure that the students have a fair chance.
Right. I do know that in St. Kitts, you have teachers that go into the classroom without being trained. Some of them later on, they go to the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College in the Teacher Education Division. Now, what you're doing here in terms of the national assessment and how that will inform instruction, now that would be incorporated into the teachers training college in terms of the courses that they're doing there. That is my question, so that when they come out, that they can understand better how they are to go about giving instruction.
For matter of fact, this year in particular, but last year as well, but more so this year, the teacher trainings for their teaching practice, they were placed on the grade 6. So they are familiar with the curriculum guides, and they are familiar because we also have a new lesson plan template. They are familiar with the lesson plan template. And so there has been, we need to have greater collaboration, yes, but there has been some level of collaboration with CFBC. So they have the guys, we have discussions now and again, but yes, there is a collaboration.
Okay, good. Now of course, you know, with your results from the assessment, that will determine if there needs to be additional material, school material, and all of that sort of a thing. So, because if you're going to have a curriculum changed up, you know, or if you moderated or whatever you want to use, then it may call for some sort of a change in terms of school materials in order to be able to effectively carry out the instruction of that curriculum.
Process. So for matter of fact, this week up to today, schools were streaming. Yesterday it was a lot of streaming into CDU to collect boxes of resources that we have provided. The curriculum enhancement project is a capital project, and so we are committed to also providing resources for schools. So they've received resources this week. Last year in December, I think the minister was there to be able to hand over projectors because it is technologically focused, and schools have indicated, you know, they do not have this and they do not have that. And as we continue to engage the schools and the teachers, we'll be able to identify much better some of the resources that they need and be able to provide them for it. So yes.
Right, and I think it's important because we hear all the time about the digital divide, and not all students have access to the same electronic gadgets and so on. There are students who can afford, you know, from the families that they come from, and there are others that can't afford. And of course, you do not want to have this. You spoke about fairness and equity and all of that, and so therefore you don't want to have, you know, some students are able to benefit because they have the resources, and others are not able to benefit because they don't have them.
It's not just students, you know, but teachers as well. Yes, so that is part of an ongoing project that the Education Planning Division is engaging in to ensure that we close that gap. So that will, hopefully you could hear about at some time later from the planner or Mr. Hodge or one of those. But we are working on trying to ensure that students and teachers have access to devices, and that the schools also have reliable access to internet as well, because that is one of the complaints we have as well.
resources that they're going to need, well, the students are going to need to do the national assessment, the performance tasks, they would be provided for by the ministry. So that is another way we are trying to ensure that all students have a level playing field. So if we're asking them to find out the area of a square or cube or whatever it is, we would provide them with the cube. We're not sending them home to tell them to find something. If they are being asked to write pieces and put them in a specific folder, we are going to provide the folders for them. Everything they would need so that no student is disadvantaged.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what if a student on the day of the assessment is absent? What really happens?
Then we are in the process of forms for schools so that you can inform us as to what to inform us of students who are absent or even students who need accommodation. So we have an accommodation form in its final stage where students who have special needs and parents can apply for certain accommodations to be made for example, they might need extra time or they might need a break in between. So yes, processes will be put in place. I myself had that experience when my son had to write tests or standards the day before he had to have his language arts. We were involved in an accident and he was unable to write the language arts the next day, but a phone call to CDU and to the director and so on, we were able to make arrangements. So those things are not difficult to do, so there will be processes in place for that to happen.
So who is going to deal with all of this marking, the marking of the assessment? Who is going to who is going to deal with it? And of course, I know, not just the marking, because I am quite familiar that having studied education myself, that not only you mark, but there's a rubric by which you mark. There has to be standardization in the marking. And of course, somebody has to look at the samples that are marked, a few of the samples and so on, to make sure that these things are being marked properly. Ornella.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the multiple choice aspect of the assessment will be done using the Scantron machine. The language arts assessment it's not as straightforward as the mathematics, and I'll explain why. The language arts assessment, Mrs. Edmead mentioned earlier that there are different pieces that the students will be assessed on. And so within those pieces, there would be a combination of multiple choice questions and also constructed response questions. So that assessment cannot be marked with this control machine. Just the multiple choice aspect. And so we are depending on the classroom teachers to assist with the marking of the performance tasks for math and the language arts. When it comes to the constructed response questions as well, teachers would be engaged. Teachers who are familiar with the curriculum would be engaged in the marking process of the assessment. And of course, in marking, it's not going to be left up solely to them, but we will also be engaging in some moderation of the scripts to ensure that the scripts were marked accordingly. And as I mentioned earlier, the PD on the marking rubric, that was important to familiarize the teachers with the rubric so that they could have a clearer understanding of how it is used so that the marking is standardized.
What is being done or what will be done to eliminate, if I want to put it that way, bias and all of that sort of a thing? Because if I'm in grade 6, I'm a grade 6 teacher, and I am marking the scripts of my student, I may be inclined not to be as objective, but to be biased and so on. And, no one is perfect. But what will be done to ensure that that does not happen? Is it names? Names will not be written, it's just numbers. So you don't know whose script that you are marking.
That is correct. The students would be assigned ID numbers, and we are trying as much as possible, if there are ethics in the schools, to have the teachers swap the scripts. So that would even make it more. Well, we don't want to say that teachers are dishonest and that they would give, they would mark. Man, I know what Leslie is trying to say, so let me give him the extra mark. But we are human and we err. And of course, the biasness aspect would come into play. So we are using ID numbers, and the teachers would not know who the students are. And we did discuss, what if there's a school with only one grade 6 in it, as opposed to 2, so they can't swap. Maybe there is a school in the zone that could interchange the papers, but we are still in the planning phase in terms of that aspect, if there isn't any space in the school to swap the papers. But we are confident enough that that biasness would be eliminated, because the teachers would not know whose papers they are marking.
So there will be coordinators from the CDU to ensure, of course, that you have the assessment items, the administrators, and that the marking is fair.
Yes. And we also have a team of persons who wrote, because there were a team of persons who spent 2 weeks writing the items taken from schools, teachers who are engaged in the curriculum, a couple retired persons, but they spent 2 weeks writing the items. Those persons will also be engaged in particularly the moderation activity, because like you said, we will be moderating. If teachers are marking, we are going to also moderate the assessment to see if the marking is in line with the rubric that has been provided.
Okay. And so therefore you're dealing with specialists who would have designed the assessment.
Some of them were persons who wrote the curriculum, helped to write the curriculum, and they were engaged, they were trained, and they were engaged in the writing of the assessment, but they would not know what items are coming on the assessment. So because we have working with the IMI, so this has been really a Ministry of Education approach. So working with the IMI's department, that office has put in security measures in place that they can access certain things as well.
Okay. Now we are going to go to the phone lines with the time that we have left. We'll continue our discussion, but we would put the numbers out there so that if anyone wants to call and ask, maybe there's a parent, a teacher, or even a student, they can call. The numbers to call are 466-2666, that is 466-2666, 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, 767-4765, and 1-239-645-4500. We welcome your calls. Right, so
we are waiting for the callers to call in. I would just also like to indicate some new aspects, because we know the assessment is new, especially for language arts, and that is one of the curricular areas where teachers have had some challenges. So we are also preparing for them a sample of what the assessment can look like, so that they would be better prepared and they can better prepare their students. So they will receive the PDD today was with coordinators and education officers, but next week we'll be engaging the principals and the teachers on the sample assessment, so they will be a bit more familiar with, because there's a lot of anxiety. Anxiety comes with change, and so in order to allay those anxieties, that package is being prepared for them. So it will not be the same passages that come in on there, but they will have an idea of what to expect. So a lot of work has gone into the development of the national assessment, and I would like to point out, remember, it's a phased approach. This year, it is National Assessment 2021-2022. Next year, we will have the full rollout of CAL. So sometime probably before school reopens, then we will have to come back to tell you about how everything is going to look like.
You know, sometimes when students hear about assessment, they always get very anxious, as you say. There's a lot of anxiety. How will I perform? What is coming on the assessment sheet, and you know, for the and the seat is an exam, basically. Parents too get very anxious because, of course, you know, they want their children to do well. All parents want and they want them to prepare the best that you know how they could. Ornella, how do you think that students should prepare for the assessment? What advice would you have for parents in terms of their children, how they should deal with them? Because sometimes some parents put pressure on their children and so on, and that does not really help. Some of them think that they probably have to get extra classes, they have to send them to spend more money and get extra preparation for them and all of that. Is all of that required?
This is a very good question. My advice to parents: how can you help your children to prepare for the national assessment? Before they leave the house in the morning, ensure that they had a bath and they had a good breakfast. Kiss them, tell them how much you love them, and send them on their way. There is no need for you to have any extra classes, put any extra pressure on the students. If anybody comes to you and tell you that they're offering a class to prepare the students for national assessment, do not sign up the children. There is no need. We are hoping that when they come to school, it will be an ordinary day. This is not up to me, but my own personal feeling, I don't even think that we should announce the dates for national assessments. That is just my personal feeling. The dates that will be announced, but I'm just saying that the pressure, we just don't want the children to come to school being anxious and worrying. And we are in the process of preparing an administration guide for the teachers as well, so that they could help us with this process. We want the teachers to create an environment in the classroom for the students. You're just doing something. It's as if it's a normal day in school. It's not an assessment that will determine your future. Right?
So it's important, I think, from what I am hearing, that the parents and the students understand, or the parents understand, that it is not the student that is being tested, but rather you're testing the system of education. You're testing the curriculum, and you're testing the curriculum so that you can inform instruction, so that students then undertaking that curriculum can really reach their full potential or their maximum potential. And in a nutshell, I think that is basically what it is. So even though, you know, the students is undertaking the exercise, in no way that result will be used to say, well, look, you didn't perform well, you didn't whatever. It is basically to look at the education system, gaps in the system, or maybe strengths in the system, and see how you can improve the system.
And when in August, when we have our annual summer workshop, our teachers now will be also be getting PD on how to use the assessment in data to guide instruction. How do you use that information to guide your instruction? So it's not about putting blame or anything like that. It's simply getting information to guide us. It's not about assessing the teachers. It's not about assessing the schools. It's about getting information about our system, about our curriculum, and learning outcomes.
Right, we have a call. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lesroy, and the teachers there.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, wonderful program as usual.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you are working for the country.
Yes.
Now, yeah, teachers, I have a question, and it might sound a little bit on the comedy side, but this is reality. This is what I have experienced when I was going to the Bastard Senior School. Now, when I was going to school, I was in the 3rd farm, and there was a young man come down from Nevis, and the first 2 weeks he had in the school, the teacher draw something on.
They're hearing you. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We seem to have lost the other caller. Caller, you can call back, but working for you. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm a parent of a child in grade 6 right now, and with this new change with Cal, how will promotion be like for she to go to first farm? And she's in the top 5 in her class.
Last year what we did was, and that process is really not part of my unit. However, I was engaged in that activity where a transition form was prepared. And that transition form, the teachers of the class will fill it with the relevant information from the school. So we're not using CAL to place students in class. What will be used is the school grades. So the school grades will go over with the students as well as other information about the student that will guide the schools as to how they're going to place the students. So it's nothing about CAL, but they do have a form that they will use in order to guide the process.
Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, very well. Working for you, good afternoon.
Yes, let's ride.
Yes, thank you for calling back.
Yes, I continue where I was dropped out.
Okay.
Okay, the fault is not my phone, eh?
Oh, I see, okay.
Yes, so I was saying that the teacher drew something on the blackboard, and she asked the class if anyone can stand up and identify what is that. And the guy from Nevis, he stand up and he said like this, teacher, have you don't see them thing the upper mountain in the water? So the teacher said, look, sit down. When you learn to speak proper English grammar, then you can stand up and say what it is. Well, he get up again and he said, teacher, if you don't see them thing there up the main thing in the way, teacher said, look, get out of here and go down to the headmaster. Because instead of you improving, you're getting worse. So my question is this. Does the teacher make sure that the children learn to speak proper English grammar in the classroom? And if they don't, I think they should. And if they do, well, kudos to them. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Right, thank you very much for your question. And I think it's a very important question which speaks to what really should be the language of instruction in the classroom. Of course, we always say that it is the standard English, or some people refer to it as the Queen's English. Of course, there are other people who have other opinions on that in terms of what should be the language of instruction. And there are some teachers, of course, who themselves in the classroom do not speak in standard English. They use the English Creole to give instructions and things like that. But it is important, I think, that students learn the standard English because it is universal. And while the English Creole, what we call the dialect, the broken English, is also important because it is also a language. But we have to understand formal situations, informal situations. We have to understand what language to use and when, in what context should it be used, and so on. There's nothing wrong with the way that we speak. There's nothing wrong, and some people think that you shouldn't speak that way at all, but there's nothing wrong. That how we speak has come from somewhere. There's a history behind it. But it's
understand what is the context for speaking, what we call this,
switch your code.
when to switch it.
When to switch it.
So I think that we can be assured that our teachers are teaching the children the English,
Yes.
the proper English and the context, but also understand that even during instruction you can also use
Precisely.
the dialect for depending on the references that you want to make.
That is correct.
You understand? So it's really trying to help children to understand. It's not that you have to be ashamed of your dialect.
Nothing.
Because there are countries where sometimes the dialect was banned.
That is correct.
You need to be proud of your dialect, but you also have to understand that there are situations when you use it. So I think that is, but I think, like I said, everything is a process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a process.
Yes, it is a process.
Yes.
Right. and yes, as you grow older and as you do other studies and so on, you come to realize the differences, because it's a language. English school is a language. It has a structure just like the formal language and so on, and we have to understand it. But the important thing is to understand when it is to be used. When it is to be used. Just like that you don't wear a bathing suit to an interview, because that is not the right dress code for an interview. That is what you wear to the beach. Because if you do that, of course, you're not going to get the job. So, who will provide the materials for CAL?
The Ministry of Education through the Curriculum Development Unit. We will be providing all of the documents, all of the materials. For matter of fact, some of them were sent out for ordering already. We had prepared a budget that was approved by Ministry of Finance, and so we will be providing the materials for the national assessment this year.
Of course, when people were doing the test of standards, everything had to be removed. You couldn't have any sort of signs or anything visible that would give, teachers, of course, in the primary school have a lot of teaching visuals, visual aids and all of that sort of a thing, posters and things that they might stick up. When they are going to be given this assessment, do those things have to be removed?
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Some of them?
Some of them may have to be removed, but the vast majority should be able to stay. Yes. So as long as there are not specific things that are on the wall, we don't think that it is necessary to remove everything from the classroom. So no, we will not be just making the class bare walls clean. We are not going to insist on that this time around.
Right. Now June is quite a way off in terms of when we think of giving this national assessment. And right now they say, well, there's the charts that are coming out with the COVID, they're saying 0, 0, 0. Well, the other day I saw 1, and then I asked the question, where did this 1 come from? But since I have learned that, that 1 has died, and so therefore it means that we are back to 0. But then there's always this question, are we really at 0? Or it's just that, people are not going to be tested. But anyway, the charts say 0. But the point I want to make is that we are doing a lot better with the cases. The cases are down drastically. And the COVID-19 contingencies, will those things be put in place for the assessment?
We have already discussed that. And just like we have measures in place for CXE, so students have been able to do their CXE exams even during lockdown. Yes, so I had to take my son to do exam last year. He had to have his ID and so on. So even during that, we had CXE exams. Similar measures will be put in place for students to be able to write the national assessment as well. So as long as it can be done for something else, it can be done for that as well.
Okay.
That was taken into consideration when we were placing the orders, because some of the tasks that the students will be asked to do, they could come as a group and do it and share stuff, but we thought about that and we took that into consideration, and so we ordered enough so that the social distancing could still take place and so that students are comfortable that they're not touching too much things that the others are touching to do the performance task.
Right. Now, after you would have administered the national assessment, the marking would have taken place. And of course, you said that there are no report cards and anything like that, but you have to communicate the findings of the assessment to your stakeholders. And your stakeholders are basically teachers, parents, and students, and the general public, of course. Now, so there won't be any sort of an individual result as a student will know, well, look, this is the area that you're weak in. It would be a general report. Is that how it's going to be? Is it going to be a synthesis of the results from the assessment? Will it be a synthesis?
There will be a synthesis depending on the stakeholder. Mm-hmm. So what the report that is being prepared for example, the senior leadership of Ministry of Education will look different. Mm-hmm. It will be a more general format than a report being prepared for schools or the students. So they will get a report for the students that will tell them, well, the students have meeting expectations or so on, and then the teachers will be able to meet with the parents individually to say, this is what we have, the assessment has revealed, and these are the areas that we need to work with your child. But it will not be a publication of schools' results or students' results. It will be various levels of reporting depending on the stakeholder.
So how will the report be presented, both qualitative and quantitative? You can use graphs and to show
exactly
certain strengths and weaknesses,
exactly. So
and all of that.
Yeah, so you could have a graph that says what is the percentage of students who are meeting the expectations, who are performing above the expectations for the different aspects of the learning outcomes. You'll also have a qualitative report that speaks to what are the lessons that we have learned regarding the reading, what are the lessons that we are learning regarding the writing based on the assessment. So you will have both qualitative and you'll have quantitative results as well. Yes.
So this will not be delivered, the assessment will not be delivered to the entire primary school. It will be delivered to certain forms. What are they?
For this year?
What are the grades?
Okay, for this year we are targeting grade 4 and grade 6.
Grade 4 and grade 6.
Correct, in the mathematics and language arts area.
Mathematics and language
Yes.
arts, right. Any reason why those two subjects were basically chosen?
Mathematics and language arts are the foundation
Yes.
of any subject.
That's correct.
Yes, we need numeracy and literacy skills to do everything else. So we felt that we needed to start there.
Right.
In 2023, we would be doing social studies, science, and health and wellness. But for this year, we are focused, especially because of COVID, and we really want to know certain things about students. We felt this was the place to start. In terms of grade 4 and 6, a few years ago, remember in the past, test of standards used to be done on grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. And a few years ago, it was decided that our key stages would be kindergarten, grade 2, grade 4, and grade 6. So that's why we have grade 4 and 6. We have not yet rolled out curriculum on grade 2. Those are still being written, and kindergarten. So their assessment, how they will be assessed, will come sometime later. But for grade 4 and 6, those are our key stages. That's why you see key stage assessment of learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Ornella, what can you tell the public in terms of leading up to the national assessment? what more preparation needs to be done, what more consultation needs to be had, and so on, so that everybody can be on board in terms of this assessment.
So what is helping for us right now is making sure that the public is aware of what we are doing as it relates to national assessment, especially those parents of the grade 4 and grade 6 classes. We also have to continue engaging the teachers and principals in the schools, and we're doing that through the form of the professional development sessions. On the students' end, the practice test is the practice assessment that was sent out this week is one way to help prepare them, and we are hoping that once they get back out to school in the next term, very early in the next term, that we could give them some sample questions, as Mrs. Edmead alluded to earlier, as to how the assessment would look and what structure it will take to assist them as well. Mrs. Edmead mentioned a while ago that we have started purchasing stuff. There's a budget, and we are in the process of securing the materials that the schools would need for that as well. The assessment developers, those persons who would have put the questions together for the national assessment, they're in the last stages of fine-tuning the questions, the items, and we are hoping that by the end of this week that step would be over, so that we could start focusing on how we would format it and getting the stuff ready to be copied and printed. Mr. Edmead, did I miss anything? Yes.
Yes.
Right, so the assessment basically is a summative one.
Yes.
It's a summative assessment, and with the summative assessment, of course, we have to look at the content that was covered. So, for example, my test, my assessment would not be valid if there is content that I bring on the assessment that I did not cover in the curriculum, and so it will render the assessment basically not reliable or valid, right? So therefore, that would be my concern as a student, that therefore the assessment that is going to be brought will have to cover what the kind of knowledge and skills and whatever that I would have acquired based on the instruction that I would have been given.
And so the assessment only covers term 1 and term 2's work. We recognize that some of the schools would have been impacted because of COVID-19, and we felt that it would not be fair to bring an assessment that would cover everything that should have been taught in terms 1, 2, and 3, because we know that some teachers may not be up that path by time of national assessment. So the assessment is only covering the work that they would have been taught in terms 1 and term 2.
Yes. Okay. So it will go forward. We're now in 2022 looking at this, and this you would say is a paradigm shift. It is a paradigm shift in terms of our education system. Now let's look at perhaps the region. Or the smaller region, the OECS. Is St. Kitts and Nevis the only country in the OECS that is implementing this CAL? Or are there other countries in the OECS that have implemented it? And what are some of the, you would have learned from best practices in education?
Yes, St. Kitts and Nevis is the only country implementing CAL. St. Kitts and Nevis is the only country that has a curriculum like ours. The OECS is right now, through a project called OECS Pro, reviewing the OECS curriculum. And so they are actually looking at our process to help guide their process.
So we are basically leaders in the...
Yes. And they have actually, so it's been done in the OECS islands. We are not as heavily engaged, although some of our officers are also doing the curriculum and assessment course that is being offered by them. But we are going to be privy to the process and be at a certain point a part of the process, but we are already ahead in terms of the writing of the curriculum, because our curriculum are already written, and our curriculum, actually some of them have been written all the way to fifth form. So we are not just looking at primary but also secondary, and we are already now working on our national assessment. Yeah.
So we are leaders in education within the OECS.
Yes.
That is good to hear. Of course, places like, wider than the OECS, like Jamaica and so on, they have what you call a common entrance exam. You're aware of it. And yes, and people shaking their boots. I mean, people actually, want to go to the toilet and so on, because they are so scared, and this anxiety that it brings about and the pressure that is placed on the students, especially coming from parents and things like that, that sometimes it traumatizes.
Common entrance determines whether or not sometimes you go in, even to go into secondary school, or what secondary school you go into.
What secondary school.
So
therefore they have what you call a school system, an elitist sort of a school system, where this school is a bright school and this school is so and so. So for example, in Jamaica you have schools like Campion College. In Trinidad you have St. Mary's. and St. Joseph's Academy and all of that sort of a thing. And people say, when this person is going to that school, is because they're very bright. And sometimes what you find happening is that you find the people in those schools, there's a class system. There's a class system in that you find that is the children of wealthy parents who have it, going to a particular school. And because you see the type of vehicles that come to pick them up and that sort of a thing. Now, it is interesting to hear that we want to de-stream and that we want equity and fairness in the school system. Because in some school systems, equity and fairness are not there.
And remember that St. Kitts has been doing this for a long time. In terms of all students going into secondary school, yes, we were streaming in secondary school, but all students had access to secondary school. So this is just another stage. There are some countries that are just starting that process.
But see, there was one time that I think now we are seeing the need for the technical and vocational education. Now, even at a early age, you can really see who is basically, how must I put it? I don't even want to say academic, because technical and vocational, they're academic too. But it's just that they have a penchant for, different skills, ability, different ability. I can put it that way. There are some people who are very good at maths and English. Other people, you can see that they're very good at their hands and technical things and so on. Does the curricula, does the assessment provide for that as well?
Well, the curriculum integrates in TVET standards. So they have to check for TVET standards. And I'm happy to say that also that part of the curriculum development process, which is a whole different conversation at secondary level, we are going to put together a TVET curriculum for the lower secondary, and other pathways from third that students can go through beyond what it is we have already. And all of that came from the consultations. So there are other pathways that students will be able to go into. But we have a team already in place to write the lower secondary TVET, and the TVET competencies are checked off in our curriculum.
Right. I'm happy to hear that. We are out of time, but of course, what you're doing in terms of this assessment is going to help a lot, especially for people moving along the educational ladder, moving up the educational ladder to secondary school and then into CFBC. Ornella can tell you, she has taught, I still teach, and so on. And sometimes what you're seeing, even at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, is that you're getting students who the critical thinking abilities are not really there. And so therefore they start to flounder when they hear certain things in terms of analyze and evaluate and differentiate. Some of them don't even know what those terms mean.
I used to teach my students that while as a geography teacher, this is what it means. When you say differentiate, this is what it means. You have to bring out those skills. And at UE, my son is engaged in First Year University, and they actually teach a course critical thinking.
Critical thinking, which is taught at the college, by the way. So just remind us again about the purpose of CAL, just to wrap it up, and it is not an assessment of the student per se, but it is an assessment of the education system.
Curriculum. It is an assessment of curriculum, whether we are meeting the outcomes of the curriculum. It will provide us information on what we need to do going forward in terms of providing resources and identifying the needs of students, determining policies that we need to put in place. So that is what CAL is all about. Just to emphasize that CAL is, and that is the byline that we have created. CAL is for success, not for stress. It is not for stress, it is for success. It's not to put, please do not put stress on the children. It is not test of standards, so we will not be selling any test of standards past booklets. It's a new approach, so CDU will not be selling any past papers for test of standards. This is new, putting away the old and moving with the new.
Okay, thank you so much. Another just 1 minute. We're really out of time.
Yes, I just, because you asked me earlier for the dates for the assessment, and I did not have them at the time readily available, and I did promise to find them. So the language art assessment will be done during the period of the 7th to the 9th of June, and the mathematics assessment will be done on the 14th of June. And I just want to echo what Mrs. Edmead said. National assessment, CAL, it is not the new test of standard. It is totally different, and it has a whole different purpose and a whole different function, and we are encouraging and hoping that the public would be on board in this new endeavor. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank both of you. Mrs. Edmead, thank you so much. It's good to have you here on this program. I think it's your first time, and you've done very well. And it is also Ornella's first time here. But thank you very much for coming from the Curriculum Development Unit, the Teacher Resource Center, and explaining to the general population about this national assessment, which we call CAL. Of course, we want to improve our education system, and this is what it is all about. When the education system is improved so that a holistic education is delivered, the entire society benefits from it. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of our callers to today's program and our listeners. Of course, we continue to appreciate you from week to week. Take good care. Until then, I am Les Roy Williams.